and thank you for joining us tonight. We are happy to be here with you celebrating Silicon Valley Reads 2026 Bridges to Belonging. I'm Jill Bourne, director of the San Jose Public Library, and I'm one of 3 co-chairs for Silicon Valley Reads, along with Jennifer Weeks, the county librarian of Santa Clara, right over there, Santa Clara County Library District, and Dr. David Tostin, County Superintendent of Schools, who you will hear from in just a moment. Silicon Valley Reads happens with the support of our community. We want to thank our advisory board members who have played a key role in helping keep Silicon Valley Reads relevant and current throughout the years. Will past and current board members please stand and be recognized? Stand, yay. Okay, as most of you know, Silicon Valley Reads is a community engagement program made possible by community support, and our program couldn't happen without our donors. You can see a list on the back of your program, and we would like to thank all of our donors and give a special acknowledgement to our major donors, the Friends of the Cupertino Library, Christie's Real Estate, Alice and Michael Parsons, Cupertino Library Foundation, the Silicon Valley Library System, the Friends of the San Jose West Valley Library, the Friends of the Saratoga Libraries, Santa Clara County Library District Foundation, First Five of Santa Clara County, and Magical Bridge Foundation. Let's hear it for our donors, please. Many of those folks are here tonight, and we really appreciate your support. Our sincere thanks goes to our moderator this evening, Sal Pizarro, and our featured authors, who you will hear from shortly. We would also like to thank De Anza College for generously donating this venue for tonight's event and supporting us with the art exhibit, A Sense of Belonging, at the Ufrit Museum of Art off the Lobry. Please visit the show if you haven't already after this event. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. David Tostin from the Santa Clara County Office of Education to present our speakers for tonight. Thank you.
Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. As was shared, I'm David Tostin. I'm the County Superintendent of Schools, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be here with you tonight after all of the weeks of planning, to spend time just learning together and uplifting the importance of literacy. And before we get to the great part of the program, you just have to listen to me read in public for a few moments, and then we'll get to the good stuff. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's panel. And I'd ask the moderator and the authors to please come out as I introduce you. Our moderator tonight is Sal Pizarro. He has been the around town columnist for the San Jose Mercury News the past 20 years. His writing focuses on the people and the events in Silicon Valley's cultural scene. He's a member of the Silicon Valley Reads Advisory Board, a past president of the Rotary Club of San Jose, and he has served as the MC for various nonprofit events in the Valley, including moderating our event for almost 10 years. Our panelists are in good hands tonight. Thank you. Next, I am honored to introduce and welcome John A. Powell, the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute and professor at UC Berkeley. Throughout a distinguished career serving as the National Legal Director of the ACLU and teaching both at Harvard and Columbia, John has pioneered the frameworks of targeted universalism and opportunity-based equity. He's a leading visionary on how we move from a culture of othering to one of belonging. Tonight, we'll be diving into those concepts through his book, The Power of Bridging: How to Build a World Where We All Belong. Please join me in welcoming John A. Powell. Thank you. Our next guest is Keeonna Harris, a writer, storyteller, and abolitionist whose work is rooted in her home of South Central Los Angeles. And I just want to pause, also my hometown, so very special connection. Happy to be in San Jose, second greatest city in California. Keeonna is a powerful voice for women impacted by mass incarceration and is the founder of the Borderland Project, a vital mental health support system for families maintaining ties with incarcerated loved ones. A celebrated author of Mainline Mama and fellow of PEN America, Tin House, and Hedgebrook, she's at the forefront of building support systems for women and families in the justice system. We are all honored to have her with us today. Please welcome Keeonna Harris. And finally, we'd like to welcome Annie Hartnett, the best-selling and award-winning author of 3 novels, Rabbit Cake, The Road to Tender Hearts, and our featured selection, Unlikely Animals. A celebrated voice in contemporary fiction, Annie has received prestigious fellowships from the MacDowell Colony and the Boston Public Library. Beyond her own writing, she is dedicated to supporting the creative community, co-running accountability workshops to help writers embrace the joyful, terrible process of bringing stories to life. She joins us today from Massachusetts. Please welcome Annie Hartnett. I'm really looking forward, as all of you are, to hearing from this esteemed panel. We'll be accepting questions on note cards throughout the program, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A time at the end. We have a few volunteers scanning the room, so if you need a card or have a question that needs to be collected, please share it with one of our volunteers. And lastly, I wanted to give you some instructions on how you can participate tonight. Please take this time to silence your phones. Put it on stun, not noise. And without further ado, what we've all been waiting for, I'll turn it over to you, Sal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Tostin. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's program. I see a lot of familiar faces here in the audience, our Silicon Valley Reads regulars, and I know that you'll be filling out those cards and providing us with some great audience questions, possibly better than the ones that I have here in my hand, because you're always so insightful about the books that we pick. Now, our 3 authors here may not have realized it, but while you were living your lives and doing your work, our selection committee was looking at your books and saying, all these books fit our theme this year, which is Bridges to Belonging. And so I would like to ask each of you in turn how you define belonging. Personally, in your work, in your life, what does it mean to you to belong? So, Annie, why don't we start with you?
I am a person who is extremely extroverted and also suffers from like chronic loneliness. And I also have a job that requires me to take most of my time to myself. So it's kind of like for me, I'm always searching for like where I belong and how to find a community. I also live in a tiny town where I moved kind of on the run from this house that was trying to kill us in Providence. So I ended up, it's a long story, but ended up living in this tiny town where I know nobody. And for me, books have actually become the way that I have found where I belong in the world, which has really worked. Like, it's the easiest way for me to make friends is to meet other writers or to meet readers, to share that common language. And you can meet people from like just all sorts of, everyone who loves books, which is really a lot of different people. And sometimes actually it can make me go out of the book world too. Just like, I live in this tiny town where I know nobody, and somebody reached out and said, our book club read your book. Where could we see you talk about it? And I said, well, you live in my town. Can I come to your house? And so I went to their house, and then they added me to their text chain. And then I volunteered at the food kitchen with them this week. And so it's like, books sometimes like actually have made me go out of my fantasy world into the real one.
And that's important for all of us. Keeonna, what about you?
For me, belonging means community. That's the way I've been raised. I just didn't have a word for it. So when my grandmother was watching everyone's kids and helping them out, that's what got me to understand what belonging really means. So as I, was navigating the prison system and I was coming across all these women that we were experiencing some of the same things, we created our own community. And belonging means I belong to you, you belong to me. And that means taking care of each other and leading with love. And so that's a part of my life that plays out in my work, that plays out in my personal life. That's one of my guiding tenets that I'm always working towards. And that's how I live my life.
It's a great philosophy. And it feels like we can belong to more than one group.
Correct. And I think more than ever in this time, we all need each other. And so it's about creating your own community, because sometimes, like you said, it's not about, you always living in this hometown or not even your own blood family. Sometimes we go out in the world and we seek like-minded people who understand us, and that's who your community is going to be.
Great. John, I know you've been thinking about this for decades.
I have. And, in some ways, it's harder for me to respond to this because I wrote a book. And so I should say, I used, 500 pages to talk about what belonging is? How long do we have?
Read the book.
Right, exactly. So belonging is like a lot of things that, really foundational. It happens at multiple levels. It happens in our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods don't just happen, they're structured. There's planning. It happens in our schools. It happens in our synagogues, our mosques. It happens on public transportation or not. And when you start looking at it, you find that it maybe is the most important thing. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He said the third most important human need is belonging. The first, I think, was like food, and the second was safety. His students said, "You're a great teacher, but you got it wrong. The first is belonging, because you don't get food and you don't get safety unless you belong." And I remind people, it's not just a metaphor. We're literally born attached to another human being. And when I talk about this, and I know Annie and others will appreciate this, some people say, well, you talk about humans needing each other. What about the earth? And I remind us that humans come from the word humus, which means of the earth. And again, in order for us to fully live into our belonging, we have to reintegrate our connection with the earth. I'll just say this. It's a profound thing that can't be defined, but we can't survive without it. And it's not something that we have to do. It's something we have to acknowledge. We already do belong. Everyone belongs. And as James Baldwin, to paraphrase him, he says, we're hopelessly and forever a part of each other. He says, some of my countrymen find that inconvenient and even unfair. And at times, so do I, but none of us can do anything about it. And I'll just end by saying, part of the world mess that we're in right now is this effort to deny that we belong to each other. And we'll say more about that, I guess, as we get into the questions. But it's a reality that we have a hard time acknowledging, and we have an impossible time living without.
Interesting. I want to stick with you, John, because we're in a very strange time in our country's history, to put it lightly. And when you wrote about the importance of bridging as opposed to breaking, you did mention early on in your book that for some people who may not share the same sense of reality as you and do not see the way things may actually be, there may not be a point in trying to bridge with them. It feels like even since you wrote the book, we've gotten more along this line where there are people who are not sharing the same reality with each other. How can we still try to bridge with people? Is a break the only thing we can do?
No. In fact, what we say to people, first of all, I have a hat, which I didn't wear down here today, but it says bridger. It says bridger. It says, which is a noun. That this is how I identify. Doesn't mean I can always do it, but it means this is who I aspire to be. And many of you may have been raised in a religious faith. My father was a Christian minister, and so he's a Christian. And some of you may have been raised in other faith, Islam, so you're Muslim or Hindu or whatever you are. But when you dig into almost any major religion, they pull us into something deeper. So Christian, what does that mean? Christian means Christ-like. So all the people who think you're like Christ, stand up, right? And yet, my guess would be...
Sorry, right.
My guess would be that many of you would say you're Christian. Islam, to say you submit. Islam means to submit to Allah. That's the heart of it. You surrender to a higher power. How many of us have actually pulled that off? So in that sense, bridging is an aspiration. It's saying, I'm struggling to be open to the world. I'm struggling to pay attention to the world. Now, it doesn't mean I'm struggling to pay attention to the world that's just like me. That's not bridging. That's just narcissism. And there's a South African word, a Zulu word, which is sawabanu. If I have any South African friends out there, you can correct my pronunciation later. But the word means, it's not a direct translation, but it's been translated this way. I see you. I see you. It's also been translated to mean the divine in me sees the divine in you. So bridging just means that we're willing to really pay attention to the other. We're really willing to listen. Doesn't mean we agree. But there are situations, and I talked to some people from Gaza who in the midst of the bombings, and they would say, how do you bridge with people who are dropping bombs on you? I said, you don't. You run to an air shelter. This is real stuff. So sometimes it may be too much. You may have to pull back. But even when you can't bridge, we strongly encourage people not to break. Because breaking is when you actively say the other doesn't belong, the other is not human, the other is a cockroach. So it's not just bridging and breaking, it's a continuum. So even if you can't bridge, even if you can't open your heart up to listen to whatever you don't want to listen to, can we still avoid breaking?
Keeonna, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that. And if you do, I'd love to hear them. But while you ponder that, I do want to ask you, in your book, you describe during your prison visits how you would almost have to be performative. You know, make sure you're dressing a certain way, make sure you're acting a certain way, being a little subservient to the correctional officers so that you can sort of game the system a little, not being your true self in front of them. And there's many instances in your book where you talk about how you're not being your true self in front of some people. And I think that's certainly here in Silicon Valley, and especially for the women who work and live here, that is probably a thing that they're familiar with, where they are operating in circles where they feel like, well, I've got to sort of not be my true self. I have to put this on so that I can get something done or get through this system. Did your experience, how did you translate that to your outside world? At what point did you embrace it or like realize I'm doing that? And did you make an attempt to not do it, or did you say, this is a useful skill that I can have?
Ooh, that is a tough one. It's definitely a useful skill to know how to operate in certain environments, especially environments that are hostile. So I would say that is an important skill. But for me in my journey, it was tiring. I was constantly performing. I was performing at work. I was performing with my friends. I was performing with my family. And I was tired. And for me personally, it led me to get gravely ill. And a lot of women get very sick with autoimmune diseases and other things because we are keeping things in. We're not being our authentic self. And what I truly learned about myself on that journey, and also just through my friendships with other women, I realized that the thing that we were trying to hide the most was our biggest strength. So for me, my heart is my biggest strength. So showing up every day as myself has empowered me. It has empowered my community. It has made my children stronger. And so it has done more for me. So once I decided to take off the mask and fully show up as myself, the world opened up. It opened up for me. It opened up a lot of doors. And it also allowed me to assist and help other women. And that is always, for me, very, very gratifying, and that's part of my purpose. I know I am here to champion women. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. So if I'm expecting other people to be vulnerable with me and have open and honest conversations, if I'm not doing that back, then what are we doing?
Exactly. And when you talk to those women, I know you do a lot of work with women and women who are navigating the prison system. Do you recognize that in them, that, okay, you're not being real with me?
I definitely recognize when someone's hiding.
And do you call them out on it? Or
Sometimes I do, depending on the relationship that I have with them. But there's a way to also have those conversations when you just meet someone, because I can tell. I can tell in their body language. I can tell in their delivery. I can tell in the longing of the looks when they're looking at me when I'm talking, because they see something that they want to be free. And I think all of us, we want to be free. And free to just be happy, to live our lives, to be our true self.
And quite frankly, if we're not free for too long, it gets bad.
That is correct.
So, and what you're describing is in itself a form of bridging. So,
Yes.
yep, you're creating bridges between you, yourself, and those women. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little and talk to Annie about her book. Now, her book's fiction. So you got to, come up with where your characters would belong and what connections they would make. But, throughout your book, you've got several characters who are all trying to find their place in their own worlds, whether it's within their family or the community as a whole. You've, of course, got Emma trying to figure out how to navigate her way through a fifth grade classroom, which is its own sort of jungle with those kids. Now, did you go through a period like that yourself? I mean, you kind of talked about, just now what you were doing, but, how did you see when you were setting out writing and putting your characters in these situations, did you think, I want them all to feel isolated, or were you kind of surprised that you were doing that?
Yeah, so if you haven't read Unlikely Animals yet, it is about a young woman named Emma Starling who was born with a slight magic healing touch in her hand. Like the nurse just says, "This baby cured my sciatica." And she has gone out with this. She's in her 20s, and she's gone out into the world being told by her community, a small town in New Hampshire, that she's going to make a big change in the world, be the healer that the world has been looking for. She goes to medical school, tries to go to medical school in California. And in the beginning of the book, she is coming home, has dropped out of medical school, and she's coming home sort of disgraced, and she is supposed to, her mom is hoping that Emma can heal her dad's mysterious brain disease. And no matter how much magic healing touch she ever had, she knows that this is beyond her abilities. So there's a slight magic throughout the book. And I knew that I wanted to write a book about second chances. So each of the characters in the book get a second chance somehow. And I wanted to write about how in your 20s, and now I'm in my final year of my 30s. The ultimate, the 39 is the last gasp of my 30s. I still, in your 20s, it's hard to write characters in their 20s generally, because 20s is a searching decade, and so it's hard to write characters who haven't figured out who they are themselves. But it's also can be fun to write those characters because you can change them so much. So Emma is searching for who she is, being told all her life that she was going to be great, and then she comes home, gets a substitute teaching job, doing something that she thought was beneath her, and she ends up, this doesn't spoil anything, but she just ends up feeling that her original community was where she always belonged. And so that was, some of those things happened in my real life. I did teach 5th grade in California. Thanks. I wasn't great at it, so you don't need to applaud.
I'm sure your students loved you. Now, going into your book, if you haven't read the book yet, this isn't really a spoiler because you find this out really in the opening pages. But you created a sort of a Greek chorus with your narrators, who are the spirits who inhabit the town cemetery on Maple Street. I found it to be a really fun device because they're their own community and they have their own relationships with each other and their thoughts about each other. And especially the newcomers, they almost have their own, like, it's not really hazing, but they kind of,
Yeah.
It's like, if you're new, we're going to let you dangle a little bit before we let you in and know what's what, which, it's like all these communities that seem to do that. How did you come up with that idea? When did you decide to use that? What was your inspiration there?
So this book, once you read it, you'll see why it's so hard for us to describe, because it has the magic healing touch. It also has this this real New Hampshire history that is woven throughout. And so there's a real life Dr. Dolittle who lived in New Hampshire, and he lived at the edge of this real hunting park that's still around. It's a secret hunting park. It's 26,000 acres. You can look up the NPR story about the Millionaires Hunt Club, which is just the fascinating, like this secret, huge hunting park in New Hampshire. Still exists. It was started by this millionaire robber baron guy with extra money for his own hunting park. So, and then there was a real life Dr. Dolittle who lived and researched at the edge of the park. He researched the bison. So I wanted to write about this real history, but I don't write historical fiction. I write sort of like broken families trying to find their way and like I say, and like I like to have fart jokes and the internet in there. There's always been fart jokes, but the internet is newer. And so I didn't want to write historical fiction. I wanted to write about this community that was dealing with the opioid crisis with this golden child who was supposed to heal them all and hasn't. And that sounds like a lot of stuff, right? And it doesn't sound like any of it really goes together. Someone described my book once as like it's watching an episode of Chopped, where they're like, here's tuna and chocolate, make it work. And the end of the review is, and it does work. So I was at MacDowell, which is an artist residency where I had a month to work. And everything was taken care of for me. I had lunches dropped off on my porch. I was 5 months pregnant, so I also felt like my creative life was about to end. So, which it didn't, but I was fearful that it would. And so what happened was, they also give you the tour of MacDowell, and they say, this is the James Baldwin Library, because this is where he wrote Giovanni's Room. And there's 91 Pulitzer Prize winners who have come through this place, and you're just like, when is the fraud police gonna come take me away?
Correct.
And so I realized I had written a draft of all this stuff that I wanted to fit together, and it wasn't quite working. I had an omniscient narrator. And then on my second day there of 1 month, I realized, oh, this is where Thornton Wilder wrote Our Town. And the Our Town cemetery is here. And who cares about the living people in the town and the dead people in the town, the people in the cemetery? And so that made the whole book click, and it would never have worked if it weren't for those narrators.
And they're all fun characters, too.
And it's fun to write dead people.
So, going back to the living, John, in your book, you describe, you use the term, what we would expect to be the natural we, when you're talking about bridging and breaking and othering. You said, well, is othering a natural thing? Well, you'd expect that we have this natural we that would start with our families. But, and here's where I did my work, all three of your books, from your life and what you made up, so, harder or easier, I don't know, you have breaks within the families. Sometimes healed breaks that are healed, sometimes, significant breaks, but our families then feel like they could be where most of our bridging happens, but can also be our most vulnerable spot. Can you talk about the family and what happened with your family, John, and how that you recovered from that?
Sure. So, you think of family in some ways. It's not inevitable. I did some postgraduate work in rural Tanzania. The way they construct family and think about family is very different. Going around the village and you see someone, it's like, well, who's your mother? That's my mother, and that's my mother, and that's my mother. And you said, well, yeah, who's your real mother? That's my mother, and that's my mother, and that's my mother. And it's sort of interesting because here we say it takes a village to raise a child. A village is actually raising a child there. My oldest daughter was born in Tanzania. And my partner at the time, we were living, like I said, in rural Tanzania. And people start coming from literally miles and miles away, just streaming through the house. And Lanny, that's my partner, she said, I don't know if I like all these people coming to our house. And I said, they don't care what you like, sweetie. They're coming to see their child. And it was, so part of it, even as we think about family, so part of the thing is most of the things that we think of as natural are not. We sort of think of a nuclear family. Okay, that seems not natural. Sometimes the political fights. We need to go back to the traditional family. And the obvious question is, which tradition do you have in mind? The Ghanaian tradition, the German tradition, the Alabama tradition. And so a lot of ways we construct our we's is also contested. But there's wherever we do it, there's some group that we are normally nurtured by. Whether it's community, whether it's a family, narrowly defined. And what happens when that natural feeling place get disrupted? And it can be very, very hard. So I grew up in a large family. Actually, I grew up in a family. It wasn't large until I left and people started saying, ooh, you got 10 brothers and sisters? It's like, yeah, what's your point? And I'm number 6, so you couldn't stop before 6. I mean, that just wouldn't be right. Anything after that's just gravy. So my father's a Christian minister. My parents were sharecroppers. I was one of the first children born in the big city. I was born in Detroit. And my family was magical. They couldn't cure brain tumors either, but they were magical, and in some ways still are. I could tell you stories that just doctors, what it says, couldn't happen, it's not possible. And they were very, very, very serious about their Christianity. So it wasn't going to church on Sunday. I mean, you went Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then in the summer, when you free from school, you went to vacation Bible school. And it was fine. And I was sort of a child prodigy, which meant in the context of my family that I was given sermons when I was 10 years old. I could quote the Bible verbatim. But I also started reading beyond the Bible. I started reading about the world. And at some point, I started reading about Chinese.
The Chinese.
And I grew up in what was called Black Bottom, Detroit. It was called Black Bottom because it was black, and it was the bottom. And which meant no Chinese. So I didn't know any Chinese. But in reading about Chinese, it became clear to me that most of them were not Christians. Most of them had never heard of Christianity. There's some, obviously, but not most. And the church taught that unless you were baptized, not just in Christian faith, but in that particular church, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. So I'm 11 years old, and it hadn't occurred to me until later. But every service, they'd end on Sunday morning, and they'd say, before we end the service, does anyone have any questions? And again, it hadn't occurred to me that no one had ever asked a question. So this Sunday, they said, does anyone have any question? And I stood up, and there was an audible gasp. And the minister said, that's all right, Brother Powell, what is your question? And I said, remember, this is an all-black church in Black Bottom, Detroit. And I said, what's going to happen to the Chinese? And people were like, what? I thought you had a real question. But the minister couldn't answer it. He went to different parts of the Bible, and he was fumbling around. He was trying to be gracious, but he was also getting frustrated. So finally, at the end, he just said, you know what? Don't worry about it. But I did worry about it, and I never went back to church. And it created a break in my family because the church also taught that if someone fell away from the church, you were not to have fellowship with them. So for 5 years, this really tight-knit, loving family, my father in particular, but others as well, stopped speaking to me. When they go out to church on Sunday, and it was like a bad Cinderella movie because there were no golden slippers. They would leave me a list of chores, work to do, because they didn't want me to be whatever. And the hardest part, so it was a break with this family, a break in my loving, belonging family. But it was also a break with God, because it wasn't just that my dad had distanced myself with me. I was going to hell. And I remember as a 11 and 12-year-old just crying and saying, I know. I mean, I have a healthy sense of myself, but it was really a conviction. It's like I simply could not be part of something that's going to say 1 billion people, women, children, good people, bad people, were going to go to hell because they had not been converted to Christianity and never even heard of Christ. That just seemed to me, it's like, how could you be a part of something? So that was the big break. I was finished, and my mom, as I realized later, both of my parents were bodhisattvas, for those who know Buddhism and Hinduism. But my mom went to work. It's like, I don't care what the Bible says. These are two people who are loves of my life. I cannot live with this break. And so she just went to work. And as I was writing the book and thinking about it, it's like, yeah, that's where I learned bridging. My mom.
Your mom.
And she was doing it up to the day she died.
It's amazing. Now, Keeonna, your book is your memoir. It starts from when you were a teenager and goes through basically the next 20 years. And it covers so much of your life, so many of your internal thoughts, including breaks with your family that you talk about, and a lot of difficult times. Was that, in writing the book, was that very difficult for you to put some of that down on paper, knowing that your family members would read it and possibly, some of them for the first time, learn some of this about you?
When I decided to write the book, I had a long sit down with everybody. Like, this book is going to come out, it's going to say some crazy stuff, some wild stuff that we all know is true. So they were prepared. And we had already done healing as a family, so there wasn't any big uproar or surprises when it came out, because there was a lot of things that were difficult to see. I know my mother had a really hard time seeing it on paper, in realizing, because she's so many years, removed from everything, but just seeing in some of the ways she responded to me, like when she found out I was pregnant, and the lack of support. And also realizing a lot of like my aunts and some of my cousins and other family members really reckoning with why they were so upset with me, because I was being punished. And in my family and in the book, I talk a lot about looking good. Because when you look good, no one asks questions. And so when I got pregnant with my son at 15, I blew up this whole facade with my family. And I also come from a really religious family. My grandmother was also a pastor. So, going to church, and now Keeonna is now pregnant. That is making us all look insane. So there was a lot of troubling times, but it was very healing to write it. I thought it would be tougher for me, and I did run into a couple of times where I didn't realize how much it still hurt, especially because I now have a son that at the time when I was writing, he was 14. And so looking at him, and we have very different lives. And, he would ask me, what were you doing when you were 14, 15? And I was like, I had a whole kid, sir. Like that, our realities are totally different. But I think the book definitely healed my family, definitely led us to confront a lot of judgment, but also let us put to bed shame that I had been through away for myself and I was no longer carrying, but shame from other people, shame for other people in the family. So it was a good thing.
Well, that's good.
There was no blow-ups.
Good. I know when I was reading it, because you mentioned in one passage, Jason is having some difficulties with your son Trey.
Yes.
When he's 15.
Yes.
And thinking about back to what he was doing when he was 15.
Yes.
And they also were having very different lives.
Correct.
Trey was playing basketball, going on travel teams. There was a lot there. But I thought about him because you wrote a great deal about with your letters between you and Jason, starting, at 14, 15 years old, and going for several years. And I wondered what he thought of those passages and reading those letters. Did he talk to you about that?
My oldest son?
Yeah.
Yes. What I wished for this book, especially, not only is my book a love letter to Black and brown girls and women, it's a letter to my sons, especially my older sons. This is so emotional. Because I really wanted them to know me. Because they think they know me. I'm their mom. I have my doctorate. I have all of these amazing accolades. I have a very happy life. I'm a disciplinarian. I'm just their mom. And even though they were there on the prison visits and they saw me visiting and they know my extended family from the prisons, they didn't know what was going on deep down inside of me and what I was actually contending with day to day. So it has allowed for myself and my oldest son to become even closer than what we are, because he understands me. And I think it was the first time that he actually saw me as like, wow, my mom is a human. She's just a human person. She has the human experience when she cries and things hurt her feelings and things like that. So it's been very beautiful to watch him digest the good and the bad from myself and his father. And really, I think it's created more empathy and compassion for his father.
Well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, I think we all don't know our parents.
Correct.
In some ways, I can tell you, my mom, when she was a teenager, apparently ran off to Hawaii to live with one of my aunts for 6 months. I have no idea what that was about. Still don't, but she came back. Okay. It was well before I came along, so. But every now and then she'll mention it. Oh yeah, that was when I was living with your Aunt Margaret in Hawaii. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What was that? So, going back to your book, Annie, you mentioned that you do touch on, well, not more touch on it. Part of the book is dealing with the opioid epidemic and mental health. You, I think, did that pretty successfully. You didn't really, you didn't
Pretty
do
successfully?
well, I mean, in the sense that you did not give pat answers for everything. You didn't make everyone an angel. You know, you're Clive Starling, who is dealing with a number of issues actually, but certainly is having some dementia problems. He's not an angel. He's not easy to deal with a lot, and you're very frank with that, and there are things that happen within the family involving that. And another, in several of your characters, at least 3 that I can think of, have, connections with drugs, and some of them you've got more sympathy than others, I think, with how they're dealt with, without giving much away. Why did you want to include these aspects in your book? Why was that important to you?
Yeah, so first of all, I shouldn't tease you on stage.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. You're just othering me slightly.
No, teasing actually brings people together if you're from an Irish Catholic family. So the book is based on a real town. So in the book, it's called Everton, New Hampshire, which means Boar Town. In real life, the town is called Newport, New Hampshire. And I had to change the name, not because I was necessarily worried about what the people in the town would think, but because Newport, in really anywhere in the U.S., you think Newport, Rhode Island, and you think wealthy, and all the mansions. And there is only one mansion in Newport, New Hampshire. It is a very ordinary New England town with one mansion where this robber baron lived, which is how the book sort of came to be. I saw this mansion and I was like, what is this mansion doing in this town? And then I started researching that this mansion was built in 1886 by this kooky guy who had made all these millions in different ways and knocked down the house he had been born in except for his childhood bedroom, which is so weird, but it's something I would like to do. And then he built this mansion around it, and then he built this animal park. So that was what I started working with, but then I started to thinking about the town around it and researching into beyond just the history of that, because I wanted to set the book in 2014. And so I started to look at what the town actually is like. And the way that this town is a lovely town, and I've spent a lot of time there, have a lot of friends there now. I was visiting the town, I was visiting my friends there, and then I started researching the town and spending all this time in the Historical Society and just finding out about what it actually is like to live in the town. In a lot of ways, it's like it kind of is like Gilmore Girls, but it also does, like, the way that it makes the Boston Globe in the 90s is it's called the article is called Big City Drugs Come to Whistle Stop Town. And so it still has the opioid crisis, has hit many small towns in America. And so whenever I learn something that is true, I can't ignore it. I wouldn't be a good writer on Gilmore Girls, because I'd be like, what about the opioids that are clearly, So I just didn't mean to. I just worked it in because I found out about it. And if it's in my brain, it's going to come out on the page. And so it showed up in one of the characters, and it was supposed to be sort of, I mean, I don't know how you could put in that as just like a tiny thing, but it grew into something that was like, okay, this is something I'm really exploring, because like the sense it's told from the people in the cemetery, they are obsessed with how people die and whether it's an acceptable death or an unacceptable death to them. And which was interesting because I wrote the book before it came, the book sold to Random House in February 2020. So then I had to edit a book, a kooky book about life and death, starting in March 2020, and it was about acceptable and unacceptable death, and I had no childcare, and I wrote it with handfuls of M&Ms at 3:30 in the morning. So if you want to know why it's a weird book, that's why. But so with the graveyard, every single one of them, no matter when they died, even if they, lived till 102, they wish they had one more day to be alive. And each one knows exactly what they would do. Like some of them are like, I would eat an entire chocolate cake. One of them's like, I would have sex and remember to enjoy it this time. And I would run. And they just want the experience of being in a body, but they are also at peace with that they're dead now. But they are watching the living and thinking about their lives. And when somebody dies at 91, they are excited to see him again. And when the kids die from a drug-related overdose, they are pissed because they see all those days that kid didn't get to live. And so, it snuck up on me, but it made the book mean much more than my original, kooky. I always start with a kooky idea, and then it deepens over time.
Well, so, some of those characters are really well done, very complex, including the cemetery characters. So
Thank you.
You did a good job with that. Let's see, we've got a couple of minutes left here before we get to the audience questions. John, I want to ask you, in talking about, building a better world, building, moving towards a world of bridging. What is something that, besides read your book, what is something that everyone in this room could do tomorrow to build a bridge in their own community, however they see that community? Whether it's a conversation, a gesture, or even just a change of mindset. Is there something that we all should be working on?
I think so. So there are different kinds of bridges. And, those of you who looked at the book, we talk about short bridges and long bridges. And oftentimes when people think about bridging, they go to the longest bridge. So I tell the story of talking to a friend of mine who's a minister about the need to bridge and bridging with people who are different than you, bridging with people who you don't like, bridging with people who you don't understand. And he says, so, are you telling me as a Christian minister I should bridge with the devil? And I said, that would indeed be a long bridge. So let's not start there. So all of you, start with something that's challenging but doable. So there's a person that you're pissed because they didn't bring back your favorite plate last year, or they brought it back and it was broken, or someone that just like the last 5 times we've gone to lunch, I paid and they didn't say thank you, and I'm not calling them anymore. So something that's relatively a short bridge. Saying it's a short bridge doesn't mean it's easy. And there's even one other thing I would say. So pick someone who you're at some distance and try to bridge. The bridging is about mainly listening, but not listening with the head, listening with the heart. Because when the head is listening, the mind, the ego likes to be right. And so you're looking for oh no, she's got that wrong. It was not Tuesday, it was Wednesday. And it wasn't, this program, it was that program. It's, I got you, that's the mind. And I teach at Berkeley with really bright students, and we teach them to have these critical minds, to catch check the footnotes, if they get the footnotes right. And that's useful. But it's not useful for building relationships. So the mind wants to be right. The heart wants to be in relationship. So listen with the heart. Listen with how they feel. Listen what they're afraid of, what brings them joy. So that's the one thing I would do. And I would say, if you don't have someone to do that with, or even if you do, also do that with yourself. Keeonna talked about how, with their family, their shame, or how sometimes we put in a place of performance, where either we or our community say, I don't like this about you, and it's a serious part of ourselves. So welcome and get to know parts of yourself that you actually don't spend much time with. And I'll give you one example, and I'll stop. A lot of people talk about the way the world is right now. People talk about it being really scary, and there's all this crazy stuff, and a lot of fear, and there should be. And there was an Atlantic magazine article about Don't Be Afraid. That was the title of the article, written by a general. It was a great article. The title was terrible, because you should be afraid. And so I say to people, that's one of the things you could bridge with. If you're feeling fear, if you're feeling anxiety, we sometimes push it away so we don't learn from it. We just think, that's a bad feeling I have. I don't want to feel that, get away. So the two things then, bridge with some part of yourself that you've not been willing to spend time with, and then bridge with someone who, it's not a long bridge, it's not an impossible bridge, and just see how it goes.
Okay. We've all got our homework. As you were talking, I was thinking about someone who emailed me a few months ago, and I'm not going to say that they didn't even anger or annoy me so much, but I just put it aside and said, well, I can't deal with that right now. And I'm like, yeah, I should email that person back and start that conversation.
Great.
So that's a good one. Okay, we have a handful of questions here from the audience, and as I promised, they are all much more interesting than the one I've asked you.
You did a great job.
Correct.
Well,
No, you should tell him he did a pretty good job.
pretty good job, yeah. And for that reason, we're going to start. We're going to start with Annie. From the audience, do you approach writing differently now than when you first started? And that can encompass your, preparation, your actual process. How's it evolved for you?
Yeah, when I first started, my first book came out in 2017, and I wrote that book in graduate school. And so that book was me learning how to write a novel and writing about what I thought was interesting. And I was not thinking about whether people would like it or not, and whether they would, whether it would make them happy, whether it would, I wasn't thinking about my audience. And so when that book came out, I was very lucky in that many people liked it. It was, I got great reviews. It did well. Everything, like my dream came true, right? And then my dog died. And the combination of like suddenly everyone could read what I think, and my dog dying, who was, my sort of soul dog, I was just unbelievably depressed. And I couldn't really find my way with writing for a while. I took like a whole year off. And I have since found, I run these, they're called accountability workshops, trying to make writers commit to routines. Or not make, I don't make anybody do anything, but help writers commit to routines, because what I learned is that the personal had become public, and I had to just recalibrate, like I had to sort of redefine my relationship to writing. I had to make it personal again. I had to not think about, you want to make everybody happy, you can't make everybody happy. Some people are just not going to like your work. Some people have no business reading your work. And so I was very depressed, and the way that I crawled myself back was actually finding community. I found an accountability partner, and we just committed to keeping track of writing 500 words a day and keeping track in email. So that is what changed for me, is that I realized that I actually need other people to ask me how my work is going, and that I need a regular routine, and to not think about, I just had to learn not to think about the publishing process, because the publishing is so different from the writing. So it's a real mistake to think about, like, how are people going to, like, what's Goodreads going to think? It's just, so it makes a lot of sense to me that Stephen King says he writes for one person and he writes for his wife, and that's why he can write so many books.
Great. I know. Yeah, we talked. You have an entirely different writing style, I know, than 500 words a day. But you've got a more interesting question. Keeonna, if your story is adapted to film, who would you want? Would you want to play yourself, or would you choose to have someone else?
I've been waiting for this question my whole life. And if anyone knows
Mainline
me,
Mama, the
let
movie.
me tell you, I have the whole cast in my phone, in my notes. Seriously. So I definitely want to play myself.
Okay.
But if not, I will take Danielle Brooks. Anybody who knows her.
Okay.
Let's get together. But definitely, I would want to play myself.
Okay. We'll leave the rest of the cast to everyone's mind. But another question for you is, congratulations on your book. What's the one thing most people do not know about visiting an inmate that would surprise the audience?
The one thing? Just one?
I mean,
Like just one?
maybe the most prominent thing. I could tell you the thing that shocked me was the lines.
Oh,
that when you described
definitely.
the car
I think,
lines.
yeah, you're right. I think the line to get in. Nowadays is different because of technology. But when I was visiting, when I first came, and you see this long line of cars that stretch about 2-3 miles,
Wow.
You're like, what? You think like, oh, visiting starts at 8. Okay, I'll get there at 7:30. You think you're, doing something special, and you get there, and then you're number 333. And so you're just like, oh, this is not what I thought. So I think one of the biggest things is the line and actually just getting to the front door. Another one I think that always gets me, and there's plenty of research, and this is not anything new, but just the treatment that you received by the correction officers and other people who are employed by the prisons. It's really jarring for someone who's not familiar to be treated badly from a stranger that does not know you. They just know you're on prison grounds visiting an incarcerated person. So by extension, you're almost a bad person because of that. And there's no hiding how they feel about that. So I think, and that's why a lot of people stop visiting as well.
Yeah,
because
you described that.
Yes, because of that treatment. And I think that's very intentional, because no one wants to go anywhere to get treated bad. And you're already driving 2-3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours to visit someone. So it gets really easy for folks to say, I'm not coming.
Yep. I think you both sort of in your own ways describe that there are systems in our society that basically seem intent on othering people.
Yes.
That in creating breaks. John, we've got one for you that is, how would you normalize bridging for our children and for politicians? I think the writer equated those two groups together.
Well, I have a much higher regard for children, so. So we actually, I'm part of a group called Care Lab that we bring Democrats and Republicans in Washington together, and we have 4 dinners. And I'm not supposed to talk about it. So, true. I mean, they part of the deal is we don't talk about what goes on outside of what goes on. But I tell you, stuff goes on, and some of it's actually incredibly beautiful. What we try to do, get them to do is, you're not talking about a bill that's in Congress. You're not talking about what happened today in the Senate. You're not talking about somebody getting bombed. You're talking about each other. And people are shy initially. And these are powerful people. These are, but they're not vulnerable. And so we invite a kind of vulnerability. And I'm going to just maybe violate the rule just a little bit. Turn off the camera. No, just go. One guy talked about being in D.C. for several years and not having any dates and saying, I'm lonely. And again, if you knew this guy was, that's what his concern is. He's lonely. And then his progressive counterpart, he was conservative. I mean, just said, let me help you. I mean, it was human to human contact. And out of that, some other things happen that are more systematic. And so the things that you can do, the last thing I'll say is that you can build a container. And to some extent, you're doing that here. You build a space where it's not overly prescribed, but it's somewhat curated. So we're going to help you because we've gotten in the habit of not bridging. We've gotten in the habit of breaking. We've gotten really good at that, of telling someone off or telling someone about someone that we don't talk to anymore. And so we have to turn that around. And so whether it's a library or a dinner, the things we can do to help people make connections. And those people can be 2 years old or 92 years old.
Okay. Great. We have a question for Annie. After putting your work out there, was there anything that surprised you from your feedback from readers?
So all 3 of my books are about grief. They're all dark comedies about grief and death. And I am kind of a silly person. And I just get these very moving letters of people who say how much any of the books help them. Like in Clive in Unlikely Animals is suffering from a mysterious brain disease, but it is pretty clearly to people who know about it, Lewy body dementia. He is hallucinating animals, which is common in Lewy body patients. And so I would get letters from people who whose loved one had suffered either Lewy body or another type of dementia, and just how it helped them have a different attitude towards those hallucinations and to be less afraid of death. And so I am, what I'm trying to do as I'm writing is to make myself laugh. So I'm thinking about maybe I'll make, Hannah laugh. And so I love to hear that I make people laugh. And I get very overwhelmed that people say that it helped them, heal from a great loss. It's more than I wanted. So I'm amazing.
Yeah, I bet that feels like something else.
Yeah.
Keeonna, one for you. I think this will be I've got one last question for all of you, but this one is for preteen girls what suggestions do you have for realizing their potential while dealing with peer pressure and social media today?
Ooh,
Yeah, I saved the easy one for
I
last.
know. Sounds like the talks I have all the time with my kids at home.
The next book.
Oh, goodness. I think a lot of times there's not enough talking. And for me personally, when I was growing up, there was two Keeonnas. There was the Keeonna I presented to my mother, who got straight A's and was on honor roll and who did all my chores and, you know, was doing everything perfectly. And then there was the Keeonna that was at school with her friends and acting crazy. It was two people. And I think what was missing is my mom just having conversations with me and creating a space that we can talk without judgment or me being scared to share. And I think a lot of us as parents sometimes do not create that environment for our children. And they're not honest with us. And so what I like to do in my home is at least once a week, usually on Fridays, is to do a check-in. A real, like, we're sitting at the table, leave me a note or tell me, and there's going to be no punishment. This is no reaction. This is judgment. Like, literally, I'm being, like, you have to really instill, like, okay, you're not going to get in trouble. Because I want them to feel safe enough to talk to me. I want them to, when they're out with their friends or they encounter something on social media that they don't understand, or it's online bullying, or if they're at school, I want them to think, what would my mom do? Let me call her. Let me call my dad. Without any fear, without them, you know, talking to their peers who don't know anything, because they all lie to each other. And so I just think creating an environment with open and honest dialogue without the fear of punishment. Not saying that consequences should not be had, but I really think that's what's missing. And I know in my household, it has changed so much. And I that's one of my, I'm very proud of that. I take great pride that any of my children, from my 30-year-old, he's now 30, can you believe that? They can call me about whatever. And I've heard some crazy things. I have 5 boys. I've heard some crazy things. And I appreciate that.
5 boys, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Surprised I'm still here.
Just one more. Just one more.
Oh, I'm done. That's done.
So here we are at Silicon Valley Reads. We're here in Cupertino, home of Apple, birthplace of the iPhone. Technology is all around us in the world, but especially here. Is technology, well, certainly technology is something that can both bring us together, but also separate us when you think about people on screens getting into their own heads. Where do you lie on that spectrum? Do you think technology is bringing us closer together, or is it keeping us apart?
Yes.
He's the only one who gets to say that. Would you like to expand on that, sir?
Well, you know, there's been all these studies recently about a loneliness epidemic, and you know, Annie talked about the opioid, and that's really about self-medication. We have when Facebook first came out, it was like it's going to bring everybody together, democratize. Google, we're going to democratize knowledge. These things are not mechanical. They don't happen just by themselves. Right. It's what people do with them. It's how people use them. It's who's invited in to actually participate. I can tell you that I was invited into a big company. I won't name the company. You would know it if I said it. They were concerned because they had created this thing called chat boxes. Have any of you heard of them? And the voices for chat boxes were all female. The chat boxes would make mistakes, and people would get pissed, and they call the chat box derogative female names, like the B word. And what we knew, and I teach this stuff, is that to the unconscious mind, it's not a chat box. It actually is a woman. And so we're actually teaching people to even be more dismissive and disregarding of a woman. And of course, what is the chat box being to you? It's your servant. It's your servant. So, and so they recognized the problem. They said, well, we didn't think about that. Maybe because everybody designing it were men. But now it's $1 billion industry. What are we supposed to do? So the fix was, which is not a fix at all, we let people choose, right? But the default still is the female voice. So there are just thousands of examples like that. And we could do better, and we should do better, and we have to do better. But right now, money is driving everything. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to do better. We don't know everything, but we're not even using what we already know. Because it's like the whole thing, and this, the whole thing with AI created literally an arms race where humans are not of serious concern. So we're not in a good space right now. There are people who care, but it's not what's driving us. And interesting, when you say, why do we have to put literally trillions of dollars into AI right now without any guardrails? They go back to the Chinese. They say, we got to beat the Chinese. It's like, why? Why? So we're in a dangerous place right now. And I end by just telling you there's a book written by 2 serious AI scientists. And the title goes something like this: if anybody builds it, everybody dies. I can give you the exact title if you want it, but that's the gist of it. If anybody builds it, everybody dies. And they're talking about superintelligence. And these are not Leylas. These are people who are in the world of AI, and they're saying we need to slow down and put on some guardrails. And people are saying we can't because we have to build this. We have to beat the Chinese.
Okay. Either one of you like to take technology side?
Oh, no. Oh, no. No, technology is good for when I want to FaceTime my granny. Because I can't go to her house because I live in Seattle. But like you were saying, I think what's missing is our human connection. That's what's missing, and especially with younger people. And I feel so bad for them because I've watched them have so much anxiety trying to socialize in person.
Yeah.
Because everything now is apps and online. It's hard for them. It makes their journey growing up harder with the online bullying, with just everything being able to be posted so quickly and things like that. So it does a disservice. Yep. It's not as helpful as people might think. And piggybacking off of what you were saying, everything is about money right now.
It's probably been that way for a while.
It's been that way for a while, but we're moving in a very, very dangerous direction.
Annie, any thoughts on technology?
Well, I don't really have any good answers, but things I think about there was an interview with Bill Gates, and he said, some things we'll reserve for humans forever, like baseball. And I was like, that's everybody's looking for you to what is safe and where people should make career shifts. It's like the baseball players are fine.
They're fine.
That's all we got.
Everyone else is losing their job.
Yeah. So I guess it just for us normal folks, what we have to keep doing is keep going to the real movies, keep buying the real books, keep putting their money where, keep proving that we do care about art and human created, all sorts of, just.
And keep convening in places like this.
Yes.
With each other to have discussions.
Yes.
Face to face in person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you. You're a great audience. And if you haven't read their books yet, please get them read. They're all wonderful, and they'll be part of programming for the next 2 months. So.
Thank you so much, Sal, John, Keeonna, and Annie, for that wonderful program. Could we all give them one more round of applause as they exit the stage? So, we have, as Sal said, over 200 free events over the next 3 months. And of course, that is very much thanks to our generous sponsors and donors. If that is of interest to you to support, please turn over your program. There is a QR code in the back for donations. So Keeonna and Annie have programs on Friday and Saturday. If you'd like to hear and learn more about those, there's a hard copy calendar out in the lobby. And again, thank you for being with us tonight. Good night.